Donald sat at the grand mahogany kitchen island that felt far too large for just two people. The cold surface of the quartz counter pressed against his forearms as he graded the stack of history essays in front of him. A red pen was gripped tightly in his hand, and a mug of lukewarm coffee sat forgotten to his right. It was 6 in the morning, and the silence of the large suburban house was heavy. This house was beautiful, a sprawling modern estate with floor-to-ceiling windows and smart technology in every room. But it never really felt like his home. It felt like a museum he was allowed to sleep in. Donald was a high school history teacher at the local public school. He loved his job. He loved sparking a light in the eyes of teenagers who thought the past was boring until he showed them the drama and the humanity of it. But a teacher's salary did not buy a house like this. This house was built by Glenda. Glenda was his wife of 7 years and the love of his life. She was a powerhouse, a director of operations at a massive logistics and pharmaceutical firm called Omen Corp. She was sharp, ambitious, and terrifyingly efficient. When they first met back in college, they were equals. They were both broke students eating instant noodles and dreaming of the future. Donald dreamed of writing a book one day, and Glenda dreamed of running the world. Donald had stayed the same, content with a simple life of education and quiet evenings. Glenda, however, had skyrocketed. She had become someone important, someone who wore tailored suits that cost more than Donald made in a month. And lately, she had become someone Donald barely recognized. The sound of heels clicking rapidly on the hardwood floor broke his concentration. Donald looked up, a reflex smile forming on his face. Glenda swept into the kitchen like a hurricane. She was already dressed in a sharp navy blue power suit, her hair perfectly straightened, her face made up to perfection. She held her phone to her ear with one hand and was furiously typing on a tablet with the other. She didn't look at Donald. "No, David, that is unacceptable," she said into the phone, her voice clipped and professional. "The shipment has to be routed through the secondary facility. I don't care about the oversight committee. Just get it done. I will be there personally to oversee the transfer." She ended the call and tossed the phone onto the counter. It slid across the quartz and stopped inches from Donald's elbow. She finally looked up, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for something she had misplaced, her gaze passing over Donald without really seeing him. "Coffee," she stated, not as a question, but as a command to the universe. Donald was already moving. He stood up and walked to the high-end espresso machine built into the wall. He knew exactly how she liked it. A double shot, a splash of oat milk, no sugar. He prepared it with the practiced ease of a man who spent his life trying to make things easier for her. "Big day today?" Donald asked gently, placing the steaming cup in front of her. Glenda took a sip without saying thank you. "Every day is a big day, Donald. You know that. David is riding me hard on this new project. It is the quarterly close. If this logistics merger goes through, I am looking at a promotion to regional vice president. Do you have any idea what that means for us?" Donald nodded, leaning back against the counter. "It means more money and less time at home." Glenda scoffed, a sharp and dismissive sound. "It means security, Donald. It means we can pay off the mortgage on the summer house. It means we can upgrade your car so you don't have to drive that embarrassing sedan to school every day. Honestly, it looks like a junk heap." "I like my car," Donald said softly. "It runs fine, and the students think it's retro." "It is not retro. It is sad," Glenda snapped, taking another aggressive sip of coffee. "But that is not the point. The point is focus. I need absolute focus today and tomorrow. David is relying on me. This project is highly sensitive. We are moving assets that are strictly off the books until the merger is finalized. David." The name made Donald's stomach tighten. David was Glenda's boss, the CEO of the regional division. Donald had met him a few times at company holiday parties. David was a man who took up too much space. He was loud, wealthy, and had a way of looking at Glenda that made Donald want to punch him. He was everything Donald was not: rich, powerful, and exciting. Donald had noticed how Glenda acted around David. She laughed louder at his jokes. She stood a little straighter. She glowed in the reflection of his power. Donald tried to tell himself it was just office politics, that she had to play the game to get ahead. But it hurt. It hurt to see his wife look at another man with that kind of admiration, while she looked at Donald with mild tolerance. "Are you going to be late tonight?" Donald asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Glenda sighed, checking her watch. "I am not coming home tonight, Donald. I told you this. The transition is happening at a secure site out of town. I have to be there to authorize the inventory. David and I are driving up together to the facility. We will stay at the hotel near the industrial park and come back tomorrow afternoon once the audit is complete." Donald felt a cold prickle on the back of his neck. "You and David. Just the two of you. Don't start," Glenda warned, her eyes narrowing. She finally looked at him, really looked at him, and the expression was one of exhaustion and annoyance. "It is work, Donald. We are colleagues. He is the CEO and I am the director. Who else is supposed to oversee a multi-million-dollar transfer? The intern. Please do not add your insecurity to my stress load today. I cannot handle it." "I am not insecure," Donald lied, crossing his arms. "I just miss you. We haven't had dinner together in 2 weeks. I thought maybe when you got back we could go to that Italian place you used to like, the one with the bad lighting and the great garlic knots." Glenda rolled her eyes, placing the empty coffee cup in the sink. "That place gave me heartburn, and we have grown past garlic knots, Donald. Look, I have to go. David is picking me up in 5 minutes. My car is in the shop, remember?" "Right," Donald said. "The shop." Glenda grabbed her tablet and her phone. She paused for a second, looking at Donald standing there in his flannel pajama bottoms and worn-out t-shirt. For a fleeting moment, her face softened. She reached out and brushed a piece of lint off his shoulder. "Look," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "Once this deal is done, things will calm down. I promise. We can take a vacation, maybe go to Cabo. David has a villa there he said we could use." Donald forced a smile. "That sounds nice." A horn honked from the driveway. It wasn't a friendly beep. It was a long, impatient blast. "That is him," Glenda said, the softness evaporating instantly. She turned and marched toward the front door, her heels clicking a rhythm of departure. Donald followed her to the door like a puppy waiting for a pat on the head. He watched as she opened the heavy oak door. Parked in their circular driveway was a sleek, silver sports car that looked like a spaceship. The window rolled down and David was there, wearing sunglasses even though the sun had barely risen. He flashed a grin that showed too many teeth. "Morning, Donald," David shouted over the rumble of the engine. "Keeping the home fires burning while the adults go to work." Donald clenched his jaw. "Have a safe trip, David." Glenda didn't look back. She got into the passenger seat and slammed the door. The car roared and peeled out of the driveway, disappearing down the manicured street. Donald stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to the silence rush back in to fill the void she left. He felt small. He felt insignificant. He felt like a spectator in his own marriage. He closed the door and went back to his grading, but the words on the essays blurred together. He couldn't focus. He kept thinking about the way David had looked at him, like he was a joke, like he was a temporary placeholder. The day dragged on. Donald went to school, taught his classes and tried to be present for his students. He talked about the fall of Rome, about how empires crumble from within when the foundation rots. The irony wasn't lost on him. He ate lunch alone in his classroom, staring at his phone, willing Glenda to text him. Just a simple update, a heart emoji, anything. But the screen remained dark. When the final bell rang, Donald packed his bag slowly. He walked to the parking lot and got into his 10-year-old sedan. The engine sputtered before catching, a stark contrast to the purr of David's sports car. He drove home on autopilot, the grey routine of his life wrapping around him like a heavy blanket. He arrived home at 5. The house was empty and dark. He turned on the lights, the vast space emphasizing his loneliness. He decided to make himself a simple dinner, a sandwich, because cooking for one felt pathetic. As he reached for the bread on the counter, his eyes landed on something sitting on the small side table by the entryway. It was a black leather portfolio. Donald frowned. He walked over and picked it up. It was heavy. Embossed on the front was the Omincorp logo. He recognized it immediately. It was Glenda's primary work folder. She carried it everywhere. She called it her brain. It contained all her access keycards, her verified ID badges for secure sites, and her hard token heavy encryption USB drives for banking transfers. His heart stopped. She had forgotten it. In her rush to get into David's car, She must have set it down to put on her coat and left it. Panic set in. She said she was going to a secure site. She said she needed to authorize a transfer. Without this folder, she couldn't do anything. She couldn't even get through the front gate of a secure facility. She would be humiliated. David would be furious. This was exactly the kind of mistake that could cost her the promotion she wanted so badly. Donald pulled out his phone and dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Glenda. I am currently busy closing a deal. Leave a brief message." He called again. Voicemail. He tried texting. "Glenda, you left your portfolio at home. The one with your badges. Call me." He waited 10 minutes. No reply. She must have her phone on silent, or maybe she was in a meeting already. But wait. She said they were driving out of town. It was at least a 2-hour drive to the regional industrial zone. They should still be on the road. Donald paced the kitchen. He had to get this to her. If he showed up and saved the day, maybe she would see him differently. Maybe she would see that he wasn't just the teacher who stayed at home, but the partner who had her back. It was a chance to be the hero, a chance to prove his worth in her world. But where was she? He knew she mentioned a secure site and a hotel near the industrial park, but she hadn't said which one. Corp had dozens of warehouses and facilities spread across the state. Then he remembered. They shared their locations on their phones. It was something they had set up years ago when Glenda started working late nights, a safety precaution she had insisted on, though she rarely checked his. Donald hardly ever checked hers, because he trusted her, and because seeing her at the office until midnight just made him sad. He opened the Find My app on his phone. The map loaded, a blue dot pulsing for his location. He zoomed out, looking for her icon, a small picture of her smiling face from a vacation they took 5 years ago. He found her, but she wasn't on the highway. She wasn't at the main industrial park in the next city over, which was north. Her dot was stationary, and it was south. Donald frowned, zooming in. The location was about 40 miles away, in an area he wasn't familiar with. It looked like the old shipyard district, a place that had been defunct for decades. There were no hotels there. There were no active corporate offices. The map showed a grid of grey blocks, unlabeled roads, and vast empty spaces. Why would she be there? Maybe they stopped for dinner. But in the old shipyard district, that didn't make sense. Maybe the GPS was glitching. He looked at the timestamp. Updated now. She was there, and she wasn't moving. Donald felt a strange vibration in his chest. It wasn't jealousy. Not yet. It was confusion mixed with a primal instinct that something was wrong. Had they broken down? Was she in trouble? Or was this the secure site she mentioned? It seemed unlikely. A high-tech pharmaceutical transfer in a rotting shipyard. He looked at the portfolio in his hand. He had a valid excuse. He had a mission. He needed to bring her the badges. And if she was in trouble, he needed to be there. He grabbed his keys and ran out to his car. The drive took 45 minutes. Donald gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. He played out scenarios in his head. Scenario A. He arrives. Glenda is stressed because she realized she forgot her badges. He hands them to her. David is impressed. Glenda kisses him. They come home. Scenario B. The car broke down. He rescues them. Scenario C. He didn't want to think about Scenario C. The sun had set by the time he exited the highway. The streetlights here were broken or flickering yellow. The road was cracked, weeds growing through the asphalt. This was not the part of town where executives went. This was the part of town where people went to disappear. The GPS guided him deeper into the industrial wasteland. Huge, rusting cranes loomed against the dark purple sky like skeletal dinosaurs. Corrugated metal fences lined the road, topped with razor wire. "You have arrived," the mechanical voice of his phone announced. Donald slowed the car to a crawl and turned off his headlights, instinctively feeling the need for stealth. He was at the end of a cul-de-sac. To his right was a massive, dilapidated warehouse. The windows were shattered high up near the roof. The brickwork was crumbling. The sign above the loading bay was faded beyond recognition. It looked completely abandoned. There was no security gate, no guard booth, no bright lights indicating a corporate operation. But parked around the side of the building, tucked away in the shadows of a large dumpster, were 2 cars. He saw the sleek silver shine of David's sports car, and next to it Glenda's luxury SUV. Donald pulled his car behind a stack of rotting wooden pallets, hiding it from view. He killed the engine. The silence of the shipyard was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of water lapping against the docks and the wind whistling through the broken windows of the warehouse. He sat there for a moment, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. This was not a business meeting. This was not a logistics transfer. There was no staff, no trucks, no lights on inside the building, except for a faint, warm glow coming from a ground-floor office window that had been covered with a sheet or a blind. He looked down at the portfolio in the passenger seat. The excuse felt heavy now. He wasn't just a husband bringing forgotten items anymore. He was a man walking into a nightmare he had been refusing to see for years. Donald took a deep breath, grabbed the portfolio, and opened his car door. The air smelled of salt and rust. He closed the door quietly, not letting it latch all the way to avoid the noise. He began to walk toward the warehouse, his feet crunching softly on the gravel. The massive building loomed over him, dark and foreboding. He felt small again, but this time the smallness was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. He wasn't going back. He had to know. He reached the side of the building near the cars. He touched the hood of David's car. It was still warm. They hadn't been here long. He crept toward the single door near the glowing window. It was a heavy steel fire door. He expected it to be locked, but when he tried the handle, it turned. It was rusted, but it turned. Donald pushed the door open just a crack. The sound of laughter drifted out. It was Glenda's laugh, not the stressed professional laugh she used at home, but a low, throaty, genuine laugh. He froze. He stood at the threshold of the abandoned warehouse, the portfolio clutched to his chest like a shield, staring into the sliver of darkness that led inside. He knew that once he stepped through that door, his life would never be the same again. He took a step inside. The air inside was stale and dusty. He could hear their voices clearly now, echoing slightly in the vast, empty space. They were coming from an office structure built in the center of the warehouse floor. Donald moved closer, using the shadows as cover. He wasn't just a teacher anymore. He was a ghost in his own life, haunting the scene of his own betrayal. But as he got closer, he realized the voices weren't just intimate. They were discussing something else. Something that made the hair on his arms stand up. Block 2. Donald moved through the darkness, like a man walking on the bottom of the ocean. The pressure in his chest was immense. The vast interior of the warehouse was a graveyard of industry. Rusted machinery sat silent in the gloom, and piles of rotting crates created a maze of shadows. The only light came from that portable office structure in the center of the floor, a rectangular box with frosted glass windows that glowed like a radioactive ember. He took a step, and his foot hit a loose bolt on the concrete floor. It skittered away with a metallic clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Donald froze. He held his breath, pressing his back against a cold steel beam. He waited for a shout, for a door to burst open, for David to come running out with a gun. But the voices inside the office continued, uninterrupted. They were loud, confident, and careless. They felt safe here. They thought they were untouchable. Donald crept closer, moving toe to heel as he had read in spy novels, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time. He was 20 feet away from the office now. He could see the silhouette of two people against the frosted glass. They were close together, too close for colleagues. He spotted a stack of plastic barrels near the office wall. It was a perfect vantage point. He crouched behind them, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard he thought they might hear it through the walls. He was close enough now to hear every word. The voice that spoke first was David's. It was deep, booming, and laced with arrogance. "The transfer is complete," David said. "The funds are already in the Cayman account. $20 million, Glenda. Clean, untraceable, and tax-free. The board of directors thinks we are dealing with a supply chain crisis, and meanwhile, we are bleeding the company dry right under their noses." Donald felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just an affair. This was grand larceny. This was prison time. Then he heard Glenda. Her voice was different than the one she used at home. It wasn't the tired, stressed voice of a hard-working executive. It was purring. It was excited. "You are a genius, David," she said. "I was worried the audit committee would flag the inventory discrepancy in the secondary sector, but your idea to route it through this shell company was brilliant." We are going to be rich, real rich, not just corporate bonus rich. And free, David added. No more answering to shareholders, no more pretending to care about ethics policies. Just us, the money, and the world. There was a sound of glass clinking. A toast. To us, Glenda said. To us, David replied. Then came the silence. A heavy, wet silence. Donald squeezed his eyes shut. He heard the rustle of fabric. He heard a soft moan that sounded like a knife twisting in his gut. It was the same sound she used to make for him, years ago before the promotions and the late nights. He gripped the leather portfolio in his hands so tightly the leather creaked. He wanted to scream. He wanted to pick up one of the rusted metal pipes from the floor and smash through that glass and shatter their world. He wanted to hurt them the way they were hurting him. But then, the conversation started again, and this time, it was worse. What about the loose end? David asked, his voice low and mocking. What loose end? Glenda asked, sounding distracted. The school teacher. David laughed. The sad little man waiting at home with a casserole. What is his name again? Donald? Donald stopped breathing. Oh, him, Glenda sighed, and the dismissal in her voice broke Donald's heart more than the cheating. Don't worry about Donald. He is clueless. He lives in a little bubble of history books and naive optimism. I told him I was at a secure site, and he probably spent the evening worrying about whether I packed enough socks. David laughed again, a cruel, barking sound. He really bought the secure site excuse. We are in a rat-infested warehouse in the shipyard, and he thinks you are doing high-level corporate strategy. The man is a pathetic joke. How do you stand it? I don't, Glenda said, cold and sharp. I barely look at him anymore. He is just furniture. He is safe. He pays the bills while I build my empire. But once we liquidate the assets and move the accounts to Switzerland, I am filing the papers. I will leave him the house. He can rot in it for all I care. He wouldn't know what to do with a woman like me anyway. He is too simple. Too simple. Furniture. A pathetic joke. The words hung in the dusty air. Donald felt tears hot and stinging on his cheeks. He looked down at his clothes, his worn-out sneakers, his flannel shirt. They were right. He was simple. He had trusted her completely. He had driven 40 miles to bring her a portfolio because he wanted to be a good husband. He looked at the portfolio in his hands. Wait. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The portfolio. Glenda had said the funds were moved. She said the operation was done. But Donald knew something about Omencorp that David apparently didn't. He knew it because Glenda had complained about it for years. The final authorization for any offshore transfer required the physical hard token key, the encryption dongle, and the dongle was in the portfolio. Donald looked at the side pocket of the leather folder. There was a small bulge. He carefully, silently, unzipped the pocket. There it was, a silver USB drive with a rolling code display. If they had already transferred the money, they must have used a bypass or a temporary code. But to finalize it, to actually access the cash and disappear, they needed this key. Without it, the money was frozen in limbo. It would raise a red flag within 24 hours. They didn't know he had it. They thought she had lost it, or maybe they were so drunk on their own success they hadn't checked yet. Inside the office, the sounds of intimacy grew louder. Donald stood up. His legs were shaking, but his mind was suddenly ice cold. The urge to kick down the door vanished. If he went in there now, what would happen? David was bigger than him. David probably had a gun or security nearby. Donald would just be the angry husband who got beaten up and thrown out. They would take the key from him. They would win. He looked at the door one last time. He saw their shadows merging into one. Goodbye, Glenda, he whispered into the darkness. He turned around. He didn't run. Running made noise. He walked. He placed each foot carefully, navigating the maze of crates and machinery with a terrifying focus. He was no longer just a teacher. He was a man carrying a $20 million grenade. He reached the heavy steel fire door he had entered through. He pushed it open, wincing as the hinge gave a small squeak. He paused, looking back. The office was still glowing. No one had heard. He slipped out into the cool night air. The smell of the ocean hit him, clearing his head. He walked to his car, hidden behind the pallets. He opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. He placed the portfolio on the passenger seat, but this time he buckled the seatbelt around it. It was the most valuable passenger he had ever carried. He started the car. The engine caught. He didn't turn on the headlights. He put the car in reverse and slowly backed out of the cul-de-sac. Just as he reached the main road, he saw the warehouse door open. A beam of light cut through the darkness. A man stepped out. Not David, but a large man in a security jacket holding a flashlight. The guard swept the light across the parking area. Donald ducked low in his seat, letting the car drift behind a rusted shipping container. The light passed over the spot where he had been parked seconds ago. The guard paused, looking around, then spat on the ground and went back inside. Donald let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He shifted gears and drove. He kept the lights off until he was a mile away, deep into the grid of the shipyard. Then he gunned it. He drove fast, faster than he had ever driven in his life. The tears were gone now. They were replaced by a burning, white-hot rage. But it wasn't a chaotic rage. It was a focused, calculating rage. She thought he was simple. She thought he was stupid. She thought he was furniture. Donald reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It was an old college friend, a friend who had taken a very different path than Donald, a friend who didn't grade papers, but who audited forensic accounts for the state prosecutor's office. The phone rang 3 times. "Hello," a sleepy voice answered. "Donald, it is midnight. Is everything okay?" "No, Mark," Donald said, his voice steady and hard. "Everything is wrong, but I have something you need to see. I have the keys to the kingdom, and I am about to burn the castle down." He hung up the phone and looked at the portfolio. The display on the silver key blinked a new code. The game had changed. The simple school teacher was about to teach them a lesson they would never forget. The drive back to the suburbs was a blur of streetlights and white lines. Donald felt like a different person than the man who had left the house just 2 hours ago. That man had been worried about his wife forgetting her work badge. This man was worried about how to dismantle a criminal conspiracy without getting killed. He pulled into his driveway and killed the engine. The house looked the same. The manicured lawn, the automatic porch light. It was a perfect stage set for a play that had turned into a tragedy. He carried the portfolio inside like it was a bomb. He couldn't leave it on the table. If Glenda came home early and found it, she would know he had it. She would know he had lied. He needed to hide it somewhere she would never look, somewhere that was exclusively his territory. He walked into his study. It was a small room lined with bookshelves, the only room in the house Glenda didn't try to redecorate with modern art and sterile furniture. He went to the bottom shelf and pulled out a heavy box labeled Student Thesis Papers 2012. Glenda would sooner touch a live wire than a box of old high school essays. He placed the black leather portfolio inside the box, buried it under a stack of papers about the Industrial Revolution, and slid the box back onto the dusty shelf. He went to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. His hands were steady now. The adrenaline had settled into a cold, hard knot in his stomach. He looked at his phone. It was almost 1 in the morning. He decided to test the waters. He needed to see how far she would go to maintain the lie. He typed a text message. "Hey honey, just woke up and realized the bed is empty. Miss you. Hope the secure site isn't too brutal. Love you." He hit send. He watched the screen. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. She was awake. She was holding her phone. The reply came a minute later. "So sweet of you, babe. It is a nightmare here. The auditors are grilling us on every line item. I haven't even had time to eat. Probably won't sleep tonight. Go back to bed, love you." Donald read the text out loud to the empty kitchen. The auditors are grilling us. She was lying so easily. At that exact moment, she was probably in David's arms, celebrating their theft, laughing about the simple schoolteacher back home. The audacity of it was breathtaking. She wasn't just cheating on him, she was constructing an alternate reality and forcing him to live in it. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark living room watching the sun come up, rehearsing his lines. He had to be perfect. One slip, one look of disgust, and she would know. At 7 in the morning, the front door unlocked. Donald was in the kitchen making coffee. He was dressed for work, his tie slightly crooked, his demeanor sleepy and rumpled. He forced his body to relax. He forced a smile onto his face. Glenda walked in. She looked terrible, but not work terrible. She looked like someone who had been up all night drinking and partying. Her hair was messy in a way that wasn't professional. Her makeup was smudged. She was wearing the same clothes as yesterday, but they looked slept in. "Hey," Donald said, turning from the coffee maker. "Look who survived the audit." Glenda jumped slightly. She dropped her keys on the counter with a loud clatter. She looked at Donald with wide, panicked eyes for a split second, before masking it with a look of exhaustion. "God, Donald, you startled me," she said, rubbing her temples. "Sorry," he said, pouring a cup of coffee. "I made you a fresh pot. You look like you went through a war." "It was brutal," she said, taking the cup without looking him in the eye. David was screaming. The oversight committee was digging through everything. "I have a headache that feels like a drill." Donald leaned against the counter, sipping his own coffee. "Did you get the transfer authorized?" Glenda froze mid-sip. Her eyes darted to his face. "What do you mean?" "The inventory transfer," Donald said innocently. "The one you went there for." "Right," she breathed, relaxing. "Yes, it is done. Finally." She set the coffee down and began looking around the kitchen. She lifted a stack of mail. She looked under the fruit bowl. She checked the chair she had sat in yesterday morning. "What are you looking for?" Donald asked. Glenda's movements became more frantic. "My portfolio. The black one. I thought I had it in the car, but it is not there. Did I leave it here yesterday?" Donald frowned, pretending to think. "I don't think so. You had your phone and your tablet. I didn't see the portfolio." "Are you sure?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Think, Donald. It is important. It has my personal calendar in it." "I am sure," Donald said calmly. "I cleaned the kitchen after you left. It wasn't here. Maybe you left it at the office before David picked you up." Glenda's face went pale. "No, I had it. I know I had it." She began tearing through her purse, dumping the contents onto the pristine quartz counter. Lipstick, receipts, mints, a hotel key card. Donald spotted the card. It was a generic white key card, but it had a logo on it. The Lighthouse Motel. That wasn't a corporate hotel. That was a cheap roadside place near the shipyard. She was sloppy. "If it is just a calendar, you can probably access it on your phone, right?" Donald suggested helpfully. "It is not just a calendar," she hissed. "It is my whole life." "God, David is going to kill me." "Why would David care about your calendar?" Donald asked. Glenda stopped. She realized she was saying too much. She took a deep breath and smoothed her hair. "He wouldn't. It is just professional pride. I hate losing things. I must have left it at the site. I will call the security desk there." She wouldn't call anyone because there was no security desk at the abandoned warehouse. She was trapped in her own lie. "I have to go to school," Donald said, checking his watch. "I have first period prep. Try to get some sleep, honey." "You look wrecked." He kissed her on the cheek. She smelled of stale champagne and cheap motel air freshener. It took every ounce of his willpower not to recoil. "I will see you tonight," he said. "Yeah," she mumbled, already typing furiously on her phone. Donald walked out to his car. He waved as he backed out of the driveway. As soon as he was around the corner, his face dropped into a mask of stone. He didn't go to school. He called in sick for the first time in 10 years. He drove straight to the city center, to a glass office building that housed the firm where Mark worked. Mark was waiting for him in a private conference room. Mark was a short, intense man with thick glasses and a mind like a calculator. He had been Donald's roommate freshman year, the guy who organized his sock drawer by color. Now he hunted financial criminals for a living. "You look like hell," Mark said as Donald walked in. "You should see my wife," Donald replied dryly. He placed the portfolio on the table. He explained everything: the warehouse, the conversation, the $20 million, the planned divorce, the furniture comment. Mark listened in silence, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When Donald finished, Mark let out a long, low whistle. "Okay," Mark said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "This is heavy, but we need to see what is on the drive. If it is encrypted with Omin Corp standard protocol, we might have a problem." Donald unzipped the pocket and handed Mark the silver USB key. Mark plugged it into a jagged-looking laptop that was disconnected from the internet. He typed for a few minutes, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "It is a rolling code hardware key," Mark muttered, "but the authentication software is... Wait, this isn't just a bank key. This is a master admin token." Mark looked up, his eyes wide. "Donald, your wife isn't just an authorized user. This key belongs to the system administrator level." She has access to the root directory of the logistics mainframe. Is that good or bad? Donald asked. It is good for us, Mark said. It means we can see the logs. Mark opened a file viewer. Lines of code scrolled down the screen. He stopped at a series of transaction logs. Here it is, Mark said, pointing to the screen. The transfer you heard them talking about. 20 million routed to a shell company in the Caymans called Blue Horizon Imports. But look at the signature. Donald leaned in. The digital signature at the bottom of the authorization code said, User G. Patterson. That is her, Donald said quietly. Glenda Patterson. Mark nodded grimly. And look at the counter signature. There isn't one. It was authorized by a single user override. What does that mean? Donald asked. It means David is smart, Mark said, his voice hard. Donald, David's name isn't on any of this. He didn't sign the transfer. He didn't authorize the movement. He had your wife use her credentials to override the safety protocols. If this goes south, if the company finds out, the digital paper trail starts and ends with Glenda. Donald felt a cold chill. He set her up. Mark began typing again, pulling up a background check program. I'm going to run a deep dive on your friend David. David Thorne, right? Yes. The screen flashed with data. Public records, court filings, news archives. Mark scrolled through them, his frown deepening. I thought so, Mark whispered. What? Donald asked. David Thorne changed his name 10 years ago, Mark said. He used to be David Rourke. He was a regional manager for a tech firm in Seattle. The company imploded after an embezzlement scandal. 5 million gone. What happened to him? Donald asked. Nothing, Mark said. He was cleared. His CFO, a woman named Sarah Miller, went to prison for 6 years. She signed all the checks. She claimed she was manipulated, that he forced her to do it, but there was no proof. He walked away clean and she took the fall. He is a predator, Donald said, the realization settling in. He doesn't just steal money. He finds women, makes them feel special, uses them to commit the crime, and then discards them when the police show up. Mark nodded. And he is doing it again. He is going to take that 20 million. And when the Omincorp auditors find the hole in the books next week, David will point to the logs. He will say Glenda went rogue. He will say he had no idea. He will play the victim, and your wife will go to federal prison for 20 years. Donald sat back in his chair. He hated Glenda for what she had done to their marriage. He hated her for the betrayal. But the thought of her rotting in a cell while David sipped martinis on a beach made him sick. It wasn't justice. It was slaughter. We have to stop him, Donald said. We can't just go to the police yet, Mark warned. If we turn this drive in now, the police will see the signature. They will arrest Glenda immediately. David might still slip away. He probably has a secondary escape plan. We need more leverage. We need to prove he is the mastermind. How do we do that? Donald asked. We need witnesses, Mark said. We need Sarah Miller, the woman from Seattle. If she's out of prison, she might be willing to talk. If we can establish a pattern of behavior, a modus operandi, we can get the prosecutor to look at David. And we need to know where the money is really going, Mark added. He said Cayman Islands, but usually these guys have a wash cycle. They move it through 3 or 4 banks before it lands. Mark tapped a key and a new window opened. It was Glenda's email archive, accessible through the admin token. I am going to search for communication between Glenda and David. Personal emails, drafts, anything where he gives her instructions. Donald watched as Mark filtered the search. Thousands of emails appeared. Most were boring work threads. But then, Mark found a folder labeled Project Alpha. He opened it. It was full of emails from David's private account. But they weren't direct orders. They were manipulative suggestions. Glenda, my love, the future is ours. I trust you to handle the logistics of the transfer. I don't need to see the details. I just need to know you've handled it. You are the only one I trust. He is careful, Mark said. He never explicitly says, steal the money. He frames it as a special project. He calls it securing our assets. In a court of law, a good lawyer could argue he thought she was just moving funds to a secure corporate account. He is slippery, Donald muttered. Mark sat back. We need to catch him in the act. We need him to admit it. Or we need him to try to access the money himself. Donald looked at the portfolio. I have the key. He can't access the money without it, right? Not easily, Mark said. He will be desperate. He will be looking for this. And if Glenda can't find it, he will start to panic. A panicked man makes mistakes. Donald stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the city below. He saw the ant-like cars moving in the grid. Somewhere out there, David was probably waking up, thinking he had won. "I'm going to go home," Donald said quietly. "I'm going to play the role of my life. I'm going to make Glenda feel safe. I'm going to let her think she just misplaced the portfolio. And while she is distracted, I want you to find Sarah Miller." "I can find her," Mark said. "But Donald, be careful. If David realizes you have the key, he won't just mock you. He will come for you. And a guy who steals $20 million doesn't mind getting his hands dirty." "I know," Donald said. He thought about the laughter in the warehouse. He thought about being called furniture. "Let him come," Donald said. "I am done being the nice guy." He picked up the portfolio. "No, leave that here," Mark said. "It is safer in my safe. If they search your house, they can't find it." Donald nodded. He handed the leather folder to Mark, who walked over to a wall safe behind a painting and locked it inside. "Go home," Mark said. "Be the boring husband. Cook dinner, ask about her day, and keep your eyes open." Donald walked out of the office. He felt lighter without the physical weight of the portfolio, but the emotional weight was heavier. He had a plan, he had an ally, and he had a target. He drove home, his mind racing. He needed to audit his own life. He needed to check their joint bank accounts. Glenda had said something about the mortgage. When he got home, the house was still empty. Glenda had gone to work, presumably to pretend everything was normal while secretly panicking about the missing key. Donald went to his computer. He logged into their joint bank account. He stared at the screen in shock. The balance was 0. He clicked on the transaction history. A withdrawal had been made 2 days ago. Transfer to Corp payroll settlement. She had drained their savings. Every penny. The emergency fund. The vacation fund. Even the joint checking account he used to pay the utility bills. He checked his retirement account. It was a separate login, but Glenda had the password. 0. She hadn't just stolen from the company. She had liquidated their entire life. She was planning to run away with David and leave Donald with a house he couldn't afford, bills he couldn't pay, and a broken heart. She was going to leave him destitute. Donald stared at the zeros on the screen until they burned into his retinas. The last shred of guilt he felt about turning her in evaporated. She had declared war on him. She had tried to kill his future. He picked up his phone and took a picture of the screen. Evidence. Then his phone buzzed. It was a text from Glenda. "Hey, honey. Working late again, trying to catch up. David is helping me look for the portfolio at the office. We are tearing the place apart. Don't wait up for dinner. She was with him. They were hunting," Donald typed back. "Okay, good luck. I will make a casserole." He set the phone down. "A casserole?" He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He walked to the garage. He opened his toolbox. He wasn't looking for a weapon, he was looking for a bug, a listening device. He had bought it online years ago to catch a raccoon that was living in the attic, to find out where it was entering. He had never used it. He found it in the bottom drawer. It was small, magnetic, and voice-activated. He checked the battery. It was full. He knew David would come to the house eventually. If they couldn't find the portfolio at the office and they couldn't find it at the warehouse, David would come here. He would come to help Glenda look. Donald took the device and walked to the living room. He placed it under the coffee table hidden in the metal frame. Then he went to the kitchen and started chopping onions. He would make the casserole. He would be the furniture. And he would wait for the termites to show themselves. The front door opened with a heavy thud. Donald was standing at the stove stirring the casserole that had been ready for an hour. He didn't turn around immediately. He let the tension fill the room. He heard 2 sets of footsteps. One light and clicking, the other heavy and arrogant. David was in his house. Donald turned slowly, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Glenda stood in the entryway, looking pale and frantic. Behind her stood David, wearing a suit that cost more than Donald's car. David looked around the modest kitchen with a sneer of distaste, his eyes scanning the counters, the table, and finally landing on Donald. "Hello, Donald," David said, his voice smooth but with an edge of irritation. "Sorry to intrude. We have a bit of a crisis at the office. Glenda thinks she might have brought some sensitive documents home by mistake. We need to find them immediately." Donald put on his best confused face. He frowned slightly. Documents. I told you, Glenda, I didn't see anything, just the mail and the newspapers. It is a black portfolio, Donald, Glenda said, her voice trembling. Please, think. Did you move anything? Did you tidy up the entryway? I moved your shoes, Donald said innocently, and I put your keys in the bowl, but I didn't see a portfolio. Is it really that important? Can't you just print another copy? David let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Print another copy? That is adorable. No, Donald, we cannot just print another copy. It is a one-of-a-kind item. David stepped further into the room, invading Donald's space. He walked past Donald and opened a drawer. He began rifling through it. Hey, Donald said, stepping forward. That is my junk drawer. David ignored him. He pulled out a stack of coupons and threw them on the floor. He opened the next drawer. He was frantic. The cool, collected CEO was cracking. He needed that key. Without it, the $20 million was sitting in a digital limbo, visible but untouchable. Glenda ran into the living room and began pulling cushions off the sofa. Donald watched them. It was pathetic. Two people who thought they were masters of the universe, crawling on their hands and knees in his living room, looking for a piece of plastic he had already given to a forensic accountant. I made dinner, Donald said, gesturing to the casserole. Since you are here, David, would you like a plate? David slammed a cabinet door shut. I don't eat casseroles, Donald. I don't eat peasant food, and I don't have time for this. Glenda, check the bedroom. Check under the bed. Glenda scrambled up the stairs. David turned to Donald. He walked up close, so close Donald could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the sour scent of fear. Look, buddy, David said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. I know you are not the sharpest tool in the shed, but if you are hiding this thing, if you think this is some kind of game, you are making a mistake. I can make your life very difficult. Donald held David's gaze. He didn't blink. For a second he wanted to smash David's teeth in, but he remembered the plan. He remembered the long game. I don't know what you are talking about, David, Donald said, forcing his voice to tremble slightly. I am just a teacher. I don't know anything about your business. David stared at him for a long moment, searching for a lie, but Donald's mask was perfect. David scoffed and turned away. You are useless, he muttered. Glenda came running down the stairs. It is not there, she cried. It is not in the bedroom. It is not in the closet. David, I don't know where it is. Maybe I left it at the warehouse. Maybe it fell out of the car. David ran a hand through his perfect hair, messing it up. If it is at the warehouse, we are fine. If it fell out of the car, we are dead. We have to retrace your steps. Now. They rushed to the door. David didn't say goodbye. He just stormed out. Glenda paused for a second. She looked at Donald. There was no love in her eyes, only panic and calculation. I have to go, she said. Don't wait up. The door slammed. Donald stood in the silence. He counted to 10. Then he walked to the living room and retrieved the listening device from under the coffee table. He synced it to his phone and put on his earbuds. He could hear them in the car. He had slipped a second bug, a tiny GPS tracker with audio, into the lining of Glenda's purse while she was searching the sofa cushions. He heard the engine roar. You stupid woman, David was screaming over the car audio. How could you lose the master key? Do you know what happens if we can't finalize the transfer by Friday? The audit team finds the hole. I didn't lose it, Glenda sobbed. I had it. I swear I had it. Maybe Donald took it. Donald? David laughed. Did you see him? He was worried about his tuna casserole. The man is a vegetable. He has no idea what is going on. No, you dropped it somewhere. We are going back to the shipyard. Donald smiled coldly. He took the earbuds out. He picked up his phone. It was time for phase 2. He called Mark. Did you find her? Donald asked. I did, Mark replied. And you are not going to believe this. David isn't single. He isn't divorced. He is married. I had a feeling, Donald said. Who is she? Her name is Vanessa Thorne. She is a former model, comes from old money. They live in a penthouse downtown. But here is the kicker, Donald. I pulled her credit report. It is a disaster. He has maxed out her cards. He is draining her accounts too. He is doing the exact same thing to her that Glenda is doing to you. Send me the address, Donald said. 20 minutes later, Donald was standing in the elevator of a luxury high-rise building. He wasn't dressed like a teacher anymore. He had put on his best suit, the one he wore for parent-teacher conferences. He needed to look credible. He rang the doorbell of the penthouse. A woman opened the door. She was stunningly beautiful, tall and elegant, but her eyes were tired. She held a glass of wine, and her hand was shaking slightly. "Yes," she asked, looking Donald up and down. "Mrs. Thorne," Donald said. "My name is Donald Patterson. My wife is Glenda Patterson. She works with your husband." Vanessa's expression tightened. She went to close the door. "I don't want to talk about David's work, or his assistants." "I am not here about work," Donald said quickly, putting a hand on the doorframe. "I am here because your husband and my wife are stealing $20 million, and they are planning to leave us both with nothing." Vanessa froze. She looked at Donald's face. She saw the pain there, but also the determination. She opened the door wider. "Come in," she said. The penthouse was cold and sterile, much like Donald's house, but on a grander scale. Vanessa led him to the living room. She poured him a drink without asking. "Talk," she said. Donald laid it all out. He told her about the warehouse, the conversation he overheard, the embezzlement, and then he showed her the photo on his phone, the photo of his empty bank accounts. "He is doing the same to you," Donald said gently. "My friend checked your credit. He is maxing you out, Vanessa. He is using your money to fund his escape. He is going to run away with my wife, or maybe he will ditch her too, but either way, you and I are the collateral damage." Vanessa stared at the photo. She set her glass down. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She got angry. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew he was up to something. He has been moving assets for months. He told me it was for tax purposes. He made me sign papers, power of attorney documents." She looked up at Donald. "He is a monster. He trapped me. If I divorce him, the prenup leaves me with nothing if I can't prove infidelity or fraud. And he is so careful. I never had proof." "You have proof now," Donald said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. "This isn't the master key. This is a copy of the emails my friend downloaded. The emails between David and Glenda. They talk about the money. They talk about us. They talk about how easy we are to fool." Vanessa took the drive. Her hand closed around it like a weapon. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "I have a plan," Donald said. "We are going to destroy him, but we have to do it together, and we have to do it publicly." He told her the plan. He told her about Mark. He told her about Sarah Miller, the woman from Seattle who had already agreed to testify via video call. Vanessa listened. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "David is receiving the Businessman of the Year award tomorrow morning," she said, "at the company headquarters. The entire board will be there, the press, the investors. He wanted me to come and stand by his side and look pretty." Donald nodded. "That is perfect." "I will be there," Vanessa said, "and I won't be just looking pretty." Donald left the penthouse an hour later. He felt a strange sense of calm. He had built an army. He had the evidence, he had the motive. He returned home. Glenda was there. She was sitting at the kitchen island, staring at a wall. She looked defeated. "Did you find it?" Donald asked softly. She shook her head. "No. We looked everywhere. David is trying to figure out a workaround." She looked at Donald. Her eyes were red. For a second, he saw the woman he used to love, the woman who ate instant noodles with him. But then he remembered the empty bank account. He remembered the furniture comment. "I am sorry, Donald," she said. "I have been so stressed lately. I haven't been a good wife." Donald walked over to her. He didn't touch her. He just stood there. "It is okay, Glenda," he said. "Everything is going to be over soon. You won't have to be stressed anymore." She took it as comfort. She didn't hear the finality in his tone. "We are going to be okay, right?" she asked, desperate for validation. "I am going to be fine," Donald said. He went upstairs to bed. He didn't sleep in the master bedroom. He slept in the guest room. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. "It is set. The district attorney is interested, but he needs the key. He needs the physical evidence to issue the warrant on the spot." Donald texted back. "I will bring it tomorrow, to the ceremony." "Are you sure?" Mark asked. "It is going to be a scene." "That is the point," Donald typed. "They wanted a show. I'm going to give them a finale." The next morning, the house was quiet. Glenda was already gone. She had left a note. Gone to the office for the ceremony. David needs me there. Wish me luck. Donald crumbled the note and threw it in the trash. He took a shower, he shaved. He put on his best suit, a dark charcoal one he had worn to his father's funeral. He tied his tie with precision. He went to the garage and got into his old sedan. It started with a rumble. He patted the dashboard. "One last ride, old girl," he said. He drove to Mark's office first. Mark handed him the black portfolio. It felt heavy in his hands. It felt like justice. "Are you ready for this?" Mark asked. "Once you walk into that building, there is no going back. Your marriage is over. Your life as you know it is over." Donald looked at the portfolio. "My marriage was over the moment she decided I was furniture. My life is just beginning." He walked out to his car. He placed the portfolio on the passenger seat. He drove toward the Corp headquarters. The glass tower gleamed in the sunlight, a monument to greed and power. He pulled up to the security gate. The guard looked at his old car with suspicion. "Name?" the guard asked. "Donald Patterson," Donald said. "My wife is a director here, and I have a special delivery for the CEO." The guard checked a list. "You are not on the guest list for the ceremony, sir." "Check again," Donald said confidently. "I am with Mrs. Vanessa Thorne." The guard checked another list. His eyes widened. "Oh, my apologies, Mr. Patterson. Mrs. Thorne added you to the VIP list this morning. Go right ahead. The ceremony is in the main atrium." The gate opened. Donald drove through. He parked his car right next to David's silver sports car in the executive lot. The contrast was poetic, the rusted sedan next to the gleaming machine. Donald got out. He picked up the portfolio. He walked toward the revolving doors. He could hear the applause coming from inside. They were clapping for David. They were celebrating the thief. Donald adjusted his tie. He pushed through the doors. The cool air of the lobby hit him. It was time to crash the party. The atrium of the Corp headquarters was a cathedral of glass and steel. Sunlight streamed through the vaulted ceiling, illuminating the hundreds of guests seated in rows of white chairs. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh lilies. At the front of the room on a raised stage, David stood behind a podium made of clear acrylic. He looked like a king addressing his subjects. He was holding a crystal trophy, the Businessman of the Year award, and he was beaming. Donald stood at the back of the room. He adjusted his cufflinks. He watched Glenda. She was sitting in the front row, right next to where Vanessa Thorne was seated. Glenda was clapping enthusiastically, her face tilted up toward David, with a look of adoration that made Donald's stomach turn. She looked relieved. She probably thought the danger had passed, that they would find a way to fake the authorization later. She had no idea that the sword of Damocles was hanging by a thread right above her head. David raised a hand to quiet the applause. The room fell silent. "Thank you," David said, his voice booming through the high-quality speakers. "This award is not just for me. It is for the team. It is for the people who work late nights. It is for the people who value integrity above all else. In this business, trust is our currency. If you lose trust, you lose everything." The irony was so thick Donald could almost taste it. He caught Vanessa's eye. She was wearing a stunning red dress that stood out like a warning sign in the sea of grey and black suits. She turned slightly in her seat and looked back at Donald. She gave a barely perceptible nod. It was time. Donald stepped out from the shadows of the pillars. He began to walk down the center aisle. He didn't rush. He walked with a steady, measured pace. His shoes clicked rhythmically on the polished marble floor. Click, click, click. At first, no one noticed him. But then a few heads turned. Who was this man in the charcoal suit walking toward the stage while the CEO was speaking? David continued his speech. "We are moving into a new era of transparency. We are—" He stopped. He saw Donald. David's smile faltered. His eyes flicked to the side, looking for security, but the security guards were standing by the doors, unsure of what to do, because Donald had walked in with such confidence. Glenda turned her head to follow David's gaze. When she saw Donald, her face went white. She half rose from her seat, her mouth opening to say something, but no words came out. Donald reached the front of the room. He didn't stop until he was standing right below the stage, 10 feet away from David. He held the black leather portfolio up in the air. "David," Donald said, his voice calm but projecting clearly in the silent room, "you forgot something." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Every eye in the room was fixed on the portfolio. David laughed nervously. It was a brittle, cracking sound. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is just my assistant's husband. Donald, we are in the middle of a ceremony. Please." "I am not here for the ceremony, David," Donald said. "I am here to return the property you and my wife were looking for last night, the master encryption key to the Omin Corp logistics mainframe." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The board members in the second row leaned forward. They knew what that key was. They knew it wasn't supposed to leave the secure server room, let alone be in the hands of a high school history teacher. David's face turned a shade of purple. "Security," he barked. "Remove this man. He is mentally unstable." Two guards started to move forward from the back, but Vanessa stood up. "Sit down," she commanded the guards. Her voice was sharp and authoritative. She walked up the steps to the stage. She stood next to her husband. She took the microphone from the podium. "My husband is right about one thing," Vanessa said into the mic. "Trust is everything. And David has broken that trust, not just with me, but with every single person in this room." "Vanessa, what are you doing?" David hissed, reaching for her arm. She pulled away. She reached into her red clutch and pulled out a thick envelope. She slapped it against David's chest. "These are divorce papers, David," she said loudly, "and they are also a notice of seizure. I have frozen our joint assets pending a fraud investigation. You don't have a dime to your name." The crowd gasped. Phones were out now. People were recording. David looked like a cornered animal. "You are crazy," he shouted. "You are all crazy." Donald didn't flinch. He looked at the side entrance of the atrium. Mark pushed the doors open. Behind him walked 4 agents in FBI windbreakers. Behind them walked 2 uniformed police officers. David froze. Glenda let out a small whimper. She looked from the police to Donald. She stood up, her legs shaking. "Donald," she whispered. "Donald, what is happening?" Donald looked at her. He didn't feel the love he used to feel. He didn't even feel the hate. He just felt a cold, distant pity. "I gave the drive to the authorities, Glenda," Donald said simply. "They saw the transfer. They saw the $20 million going to the Caymans. They saw the override signature." Glenda's eyes widened in horror. She turned to David. "David, tell them. Tell them it was the special project. Tell them you authorized it." David looked at the FBI agents approaching the stage. He looked at the ruin of his career. He looked at Glenda. And he did exactly what Mark predicted he would do. "I don't know what she is talking about," David shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Glenda. "She is the one with the access. She is the system administrator. If money was moved, she did it. She went rogue. She has been obsessed with money for years." Glenda recoiled as if he had slapped her. But you told me. You sent me the emails." "What emails?" David screamed. "I never sent you anything." "You are a liar and a thief." The betrayal was absolute. Glenda stood there alone in the center of the room while the man she had destroyed her marriage for threw her to the wolves to save his own skin. The FBI agents swarmed the stage. 2 of them grabbed David. He struggled, shouting obscenities. "I am the CEO," he yelled. "You can't touch me. I have lawyers." "We have the emails, David," one of the agents said calmly as he clicked the handcuffs onto David's wrists. "We have the chat logs. We have the witness testimony from Sarah Miller in Seattle. You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." Another pair of officers approached Glenda. She didn't fight. She went limp. She let them pull her arms behind her back. The handcuffs clicked. It was the loudest sound in the world. She looked at Donald. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "Donald, please," she sobbed. "I didn't know. He used me. Donald, help me. I am your wife." Donald stood still. The flashbulbs of the press cameras were blinding. The room was in chaos, but in his mind everything was slow and quiet. He looked at the woman who had called him furniture, the woman who had drained their savings, the woman who had planned to leave him with nothing. He turned his back on her. He walked toward Vanessa. She was standing by the edge of the stage, watching her husband being dragged away. She looked exhausted but free. "Thank you," she said softly to Donald. "Thank you," Donald replied. He turned and walked back up the center aisle. He walked past the shocked board members. He walked past the whispering guests. He walked out of the glass cathedral and into the bright, honest sunlight of the parking lot. He leaned against his old car and took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was an unknown number, but he knew who it was. It was the one phone call she was allowed to make from the station, or maybe from the back of the transport van, if the officer was feeling generous. He let it ring 3 times. He debated not answering. He could just drive away, he could just disappear. But he needed to say it. He needed to close the book. He slid his finger across the screen. "Hello," he said. "Donald," Glenda's voice was broken, hysterical. "Donald, I am in a police car. They are taking me to the central holding facility. You have to come down here. You have to bail me out. We can explain this. I was manipulated. I was a victim too." Donald listened to her frantic breathing. "Donald, are you there?" she pleaded. "I love you. We can fix this. Just come get me, please. I don't have anyone else." Donald looked at his reflection in the car window. He saw a man who was tired, yes, but he also saw a man who was standing tall. "You emptied the bank accounts, Glenda," Donald said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "You called me furniture. You planned to leave me with the mortgage and run away with him." No, that was just talk," Glenda cried. "I was confused. I love you, Donald." "You don't love anyone," Donald said. "You only love the climb." "Well, you reached the top, Glenda." "And now you are falling." "Donald, please," she screamed. "I know everything, Glenda," Donald said. "I have the logs, I have the recording from the warehouse, I have the recording from the living room. It is all with the district attorney." There was silence on the other end, a stunned, terrified silence. "Talk to my lawyer," Donald said. He ended the call. He didn't put the phone back in his pocket immediately. He looked at the contact named Wife. He pressed the edit button. He scrolled down to the bottom. He pressed delete contact. Donald got into his car. He started the engine. It sputtered, then roared to life. He put it in gear and drove out of the lot, leaving the sirens and the scandal behind him. He had a lot of work to do. He had to grade papers, he had to file for divorce, and he had to start living his life for himself. The weeks that followed the arrest were a blur of flashing lights and legal briefs. The story of the humble history teacher taking down the corporate titans became a national sensation. The newspapers called Donald the Architect of Justice. They ran side-by-side photos of him in his charcoal suit, standing tall outside the courthouse, and David Thorne being shoved into a police van with his jacket pulled over his head. For the first time in his life, Donald wasn't just a face in the crowd. He was the man who had stood up to the bullies and won. But fame was noisy, and Donald craved silence. He spent his days in meetings with lawyers and prosecutors. The district attorney was thrilled. With the evidence from the black portfolio and the recovered emails, the case against David and Glenda was airtight. It wasn't just embezzlement. It was wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and a dozen other charges that carried mandatory federal prison sentences. The fallout for Omin Corp was catastrophic. The stock price plummeted overnight. The board of directors fired the entire executive team in a desperate attempt to save the company's reputation. They issued a public apology to Donald and Vanessa, and in a surprising move to avoid a massive civil lawsuit, they agreed to an immediate settlement for the emotional distress and financial damages caused by their rogue executives. Donald sat in a conference room with his divorce lawyer, a sharp woman named Eleanor who had been recommended by Mark. On the other side of the table sat Glenda's court-appointed attorney. Glenda wasn't there. She was being held without bail because the judge deemed her a flight risk, given her previous plans to move to the Cayman Islands. Her lawyer looked tired. He shuffled his papers and sighed. "Look, Mr. Patterson," the lawyer said, "my client is in a very difficult position. Her assets have been frozen. She has lost her job. She is facing 10 to 15 years in federal prison. She is willing to sign the divorce papers uncontested. She just wants one thing." Donald leaned back in his chair. He didn't say anything. He let Eleanor speak for him. "And what is that?" Eleanor asked coldly. "She wants a personal item," the lawyer said. "A locket. It belonged to her grandmother. She says it is in the nightstand in the master bedroom. She says it is the only thing she has left that matters." Donald thought about the nightstand. He thought about the empty bank accounts. He thought about the way she had looked at him when she called him furniture. "Tell her I looked for it," Donald said, his voice steady. "Tell her I couldn't find it. It must have been lost when she was busy packing her life away to leave me." The lawyer nodded slowly. He understood. There was no locket, or if there was, it was gone now. It was a small, petty victory, but it felt necessary. It was the final severing of the tie. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later. The settlement was brutal for Glenda. Because she had used marital funds to commit a crime, and because she had attempted to defraud Donald, the judge awarded Donald everything. He kept the house. He kept the cars. He received full restitution for the drained savings accounts, paid out from the seized assets of the conspiracy. But the money didn't matter as much as the truth. The trial of David Thorne and Glenda Patterson began 3 months later. Donald attended every single day. He sat in the back row wearing his corduroy jacket, holding a notebook. He wasn't there to gloat. He was there to witness. The trial was a disaster for the defense. Sarah Miller, the woman from Seattle, testified via video link. She told the jury how David had charmed her, used her and then discarded her, exactly as he had done to Glenda. Her testimony established the pattern. It proved that David was the mastermind. But David didn't go down quietly. When he took the stand, he was venomous. He blamed corporate culture. He blamed the pressure of the shareholders. And most of all, he blamed Glenda. He painted her as a greedy, incompetent climber who had seduced him into the scheme. He claimed he was a victim of her manipulation. Donald watched Glenda as David spoke. She was sitting at the defense table wearing a drab prison jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. Her hair was unwashed and tied back in a messy bun. The powerhouse executive was gone. The woman who had commanded boardrooms was gone. In her place was a broken, trembling shell. When David called her a pathetic amateur on the stand, Glenda put her head in her hands and wept. She wasn't crying for the jury. She was crying because the illusion was finally shattered. She realized that the man she had destroyed her life for despised her. When it was Glenda's turn to testify, she didn't try to lie. She couldn't. The evidence was too overwhelming. Instead, she just admitted everything. She talked about the thrill of the secret. She talked about the money. She talked about how boring her life with Donald had seemed compared to the high-stakes world David offered her. "I wanted to be important," she told the jury, her voice barely a whisper. "I wanted to be powerful. I thought Donald was holding me back. I thought he was small." She looked up, scanning the back of the room until her eyes locked with Donald's. "But I was the small one," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He was the only real thing in my life, and I threw him away for a fantasy." Donald met her gaze. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just watched her. He felt a strange sense of detachment. He didn't hate her anymore. Hate requires energy, and he wasn't willing to give her any more of his energy. She was just a stranger now, a stranger who had made a terrible mistake. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty, on all counts. David Thorne was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. As the bailiffs dragged him away, he was still screaming that he was innocent, that he was a genius, that they were all beneath him. Glenda Patterson was sentenced to 12 years. When the gavel came down, she didn't scream. She just closed her eyes and nodded. She accepted it. It was the first honest thing she had done in years. After the sentencing, Donald walked out of the courthouse. The steps were crowded with reporters, but he slipped out a side exit. He found Vanessa waiting for him by his car. She looked different, too. The tension that had been etched into her face was gone. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, looking less like a trophy wife and more like a person. "It is over," she said as he approached. "It is over," Donald agreed. Vanessa leaned against the hood of his old sedan. "I am selling the penthouse," she said. "I am moving back to the coast. I want to open a small art gallery. It is something I always wanted to do before David told me it was a waste of time." "That sounds wonderful," Donald said sincerely. "You deserve to be happy, Vanessa." She smiled, a genuine warm smile. "So do you, Donald. You saved my life, you know. If you hadn't come to my door that night, he would have drained me dry and left me with the debt." "We saved each other," Donald said. She reached out and squeezed his hand. "You are a good man, Donald. Don't let this make you bitter. Don't let them take your kindness. The world has enough Davids. We need more Donalds." She kissed him on the cheek, got into a taxi and drove away. Donald watched her go. He knew he would probably never see her again, and that was okay. They were soldiers from the same war, going home to different lives. Donald got into his car. He drove to the school. It was late afternoon and the parking lot was mostly empty, but he knew the drama club was still rehearsing in the auditorium. He walked into his classroom. It smelled of chalk dust and old paper, a smell he used to take for granted but now found incredibly comforting. He sat at his desk. He looked at the stack of essays waiting to be graded. The topic was the fall of Rome. He picked up his red pen. He started to read. He lost himself in the work. He corrected grammar. He wrote notes in the margins urging his students to think deeper, to look at the causes, not just the effects. A knock on the door frame interrupted him. It was the principal, a stern woman named Mrs. Higgins, who usually only visited to complain about budget cuts. "Donald," she said, stepping into the room. "I heard you were back." "I am back," Donald said. She looked at him with a newfound respect. "The school board called me this morning," she said. "They want to offer you the department head position, and there is a significant raise attached to it. They think having a local hero on staff is good for morale." Donald laughed. It was a real laugh, light and easy. "I appreciate the offer, Mrs. Higgins," Donald said, "but I like where I am. I like teaching. I don't want to be an administrator. I don't want to manage budgets and schedules. I just want to be in the classroom." Mrs. Higgins smiled. "I had a feeling you would say that, but the raise is yours anyway. You have earned it." She left him alone. Donald packed up his bag at 5 o'clock. He walked out to the parking lot. His old sedan was sitting there, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. He got in and drove home. When he pulled into the driveway, the house didn't look like a museum anymore. It looked like a home. He had spent the last few weekends making changes. He had sold the uncomfortable modern furniture Glenda loved. He had bought a big, soft leather armchair. He had put up shelves for his books in the living room. He had painted the sterile white walls a warm, deep blue. He walked inside. The silence wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. He went to the kitchen. He opened the fridge and took out the ingredients for a casserole. He turned on some jazz music. He poured himself a glass of wine. Not the expensive stuff David drank, but a decent bottle he liked. As he chopped vegetables, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. It was a message from Mark. "Hey, just saw the news about the sentencing. Justice is served. Want to grab a beer this weekend?" Donald smiled. "Sounds great. My place. I am making burgers." He put the phone down. He thought about Glenda sitting in her cell. He hoped she would find peace eventually. He hoped she would learn that you can't build happiness on a foundation of lies. But it wasn't his job to teach her that lesson anymore. He thought about David, raging against the walls of his prison, forever trapped in his own ego. And then he thought about himself. He was a history teacher. He drove an old car. He lived a simple life. And for the first time in years, he realized that this wasn't a failure. It was a triumph. He had his integrity. He had his freedom. He had his self-respect. The casserole went into the oven. The smell of home cooking filled the air. Donald sat in his new armchair, opened a book, and took a sip of wine. He was no longer the underestimated protagonist. He was the author of his own story. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Donald Patterson finally, truly, relaxed. The revenge hadn't been about destroying them. They had destroyed themselves. The revenge was surviving them. The revenge was refusing to let their darkness turn off his light. He turned the page of his book. Chapter 1.